The cold wind bit through the small mountain town as the auctioneer's voice echoed across the yard. Men shouted prices for cattle and tools, but the crowd went silent when the next item was dragged out, a woman with a sack tied over her head. Her hands trembled as she clutched her torn dress, her feet bare and bruised. The auctioneer smirked. A woman, no name, no family, can work, can cook. Laughter filled the air. No one bid, until a deep, lonely voice rose from the back. $2, said a tall lumberjack with rough hands and weary eyes. The crowd burst into laughter. $2 for a woman. But he didn't care. He had lived alone in the forests too long, surrounded only by the sound of axes and silence. The auctioneer slammed the hammer down. Sold. The man stepped forward, threw the coins, and untied the rope binding her wrists. She flinched but didn't resist as he led her away. The road to his cabin wound through endless pine. She didn't speak, didn't lift her head. He could only hear her shallow breathing beneath the sack. He tried to ask her name, but she stayed silent. "You're safe now," he muttered, though unsure if she even heard. When they reached the cabin, a small, wooden home smelling of pine and smoke, he offered her water and bread. She ate like someone who hadn't eaten in days. He didn't ask questions, he just let her be. Days passed in quiet rhythm. He chopped wood, she cleaned and cooked, though never meeting his eyes. At night, he'd hear her cry softly, thinking he was asleep. One morning, while the sun broke through mist, he noticed her hand bleeding from a splinter. He reached to help, but she jerked away, eyes wide beneath the sack. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. For the first time, she whispered, "You don't understand." Her voice was fragile but haunting. It had been so long since she spoke that he froze. "Then help me understand," he said softly. She shook her head, clutching her arms. "They said I was cursed," she murmured. "Anyone who sees my face, suffers." He felt a chill, not from fear, but from sorrow. "I don't believe in curses," he replied, his tone firm yet kind. "Only in pain, and healing." She turned away, trembling. Winter crept in, blanketing the forest in white silence. The lumberjack built a fire each night, and sometimes left her small gifts, an apple, a knitted scarf, warm gloves. She began to hum while cooking, little tunes that softened the cold walls. Still, she never removed the sack. He respected her silence, but every night he wondered who she really was, what kind of pain had driven her to hide even from the world's pity. One stormy night, thunder rattled the cabin. The door burst open with wind, and the fire nearly died. She screamed, pressing against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. He rushed to close the door and saw her collapsed, clutching her head. "Please," she cried, "don't let them find me." He knelt beside her. "No one will hurt you here," he said. But she only sobbed harder, whispering a name he didn't recognize. That name haunted him all night. The next day, while gathering logs, he found footprints leading to the creek, small, delicate, hers. His heart sank. He ran toward the riverbank and found her kneeling by the water, her reflection rippling beneath the sack. "Don't follow me," she said softly. "You were kind. That's enough." He stepped closer. "You don't have to run anymore," he pleaded. She turned toward him, and for a long moment, neither spoke. "I was sold before," she whispered. "Beaten. Shamed. Told I wasn't worth the price of bread." Her voice cracked like breaking ice. "They covered my face so no one could see their sins." His hands tightened into fists. "You're not theirs anymore," he said firmly. "You're free here." Tears stained the fabric over her face. She whispered, "Freedom doesn't erase what's been done." He knelt beside her, his tone soft as the snow. "Maybe not, but it can start something new." For the first time, she didn't pull away. He gently took her hand, warm against his rough palm. "You can keep the sack," he said, "or you can take it off when you're ready. Either way, I'll stay." Silence lingered, only broken by the rustle of trees. She turned toward him, trembling. "You don't even know my name," she whispered. "Then tell me," he said, his voice almost a prayer. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, she lifted her hand to the knot behind her head. Her fingers hesitated, then stopped. She shook her head. "Not yet," she murmured. "I need to believe I deserve to be seen." He nodded, understanding. "Then I'll wait," he said simply. And he did, days, weeks, through storms and silence. Each morning he left an extra piece of bread on her table. Each evening she lit his lantern before he returned. Something gentle grew between them, trust, unspoken yet strong. Then one dawn, as golden light spilled through the window, he heard her soft voice behind him. I think I'm ready. He turned slowly, his heart pounding as she reached for the knot. The sack slipped away. He gasped, not from horror, but from awe. Her face bore scars, but her eyes, those eyes, shone with quiet strength, the kind born from surviving the worst. She looked at him, trembling. My name is Alara, she said, tears glistening. And in that moment, he realized he hadn't bought a woman at all. He had freed a soul who had forgotten how to live. He stood frozen, heart thundering as her name echoed through the cabin. Alara, he whispered, as if speaking it too loudly might break the fragile peace between them. Her eyes glistened with tears she no longer hid. No one said my name in years, she murmured, voice trembling. He stepped closer but didn't touch her, afraid to shatter the moment. Then let it be the first word of your new life, he said softly. In the days that followed, something changed between them. She began to hum again, not from habit, but from warmth. She spoke more, telling small pieces of her story, how her family had sold her to pay a debt, how every man who owned her tried to erase who she was. He listened without judgment, his hands still busy carving wood, his silence filled with empathy. She noticed that he never asked for more than she was willing to give. One afternoon, as snow fell thick and slow, he came home early with a small carved bird. It's not much, he said, handing it to her shyly. But it reminded me of you. Free. She held the carving to her chest and smiled through tears. No one's ever given me something just because. He shrugged, a faint blush on his cheeks. Guess there's a first for everything. She laughed softly, her first real laugh, and the sound filled the lonely cabin with warmth. But peace rarely lasts long in a world that feeds on cruelty. One gray morning, distant voices broke the quiet. Men shouting, horses crunching snow. Alara froze, her face draining of color. It's them, she whispered. The ones who sold me, they've found me. Panic surged, but the lumberjack's eyes turned hard with resolve. No one's taking you, he said firmly, grabbing his axe. She clutched his arm. You can't fight them all. He met her gaze. I've fought worse than men. The men burst into the clearing, sneering. That's our property, one spat, pointing at her. The lumberjack stood between them, his tall frame casting a long shadow. She's no one's property, he growled. Leave. The leader laughed. You bought her yourself, didn't you? Paid $2, I heard. Guess she's yours to sell now. The word stung, but the lumberjack's voice was steady. I didn't buy her. I rescued her. Now go before I forget mercy. A tense silence filled the clearing, broken only by the hiss of wind through trees. The men hesitated, seeing the steel in his eyes. Then, muttering curses, they turned and left. Alara collapsed, trembling. He dropped his axe and rushed to her side. It's over, he said softly. She buried her face in his chest, tears soaking his shirt. You didn't have to risk your life, she sobbed. He smiled faintly. I didn't risk it. I gave it meaning. From that day on, something unspoken grew into something undeniable. They worked side by side, shared meals, laughter, and quiet evenings by the fire. One morning, she found him carving again, this time two figures, standing hand in hand. You always carve what's real to you, she said. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Then I guess it's time I carve a promise. Her breath caught as he set the figures aside and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small silver band, simple, unpolished, but shining with sincerity. Alara, he said softly, I don't have riches or words fancy enough to fix the past. But if you'll let me, I'll spend every day proving you were worth far more than $2. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, you already have. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time, she didn't feel owned, she felt chosen. Spring melted the snow, and wildflowers began to bloom around the cabin. The forest, once silent and cold, now hummed with life. Villagers who once mocked the lonely lumberjack now spoke kindly of him and his new wife, saying they'd never seen two souls more at peace. Children would wander by just to hear Alara's laughter, bright and pure, echo through the pines. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Alara stood at the doorway watching her husband split logs. You know, she said with a playful smile, I still can't believe you paid only $2 for me. He chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. Best bargain I ever made. She laughed, the sound wrapping around them like music. Then she stepped close, whispering, and the best mistake fate ever allowed. Years passed, and though time left silver in their hair, their love never dulled. He often found her humming at dawn, her hands weaving flowers into garlands for their little garden. And when storms came, she'd rest her head on his shoulder, whispering, "You found me when I was nothing." He'd always answer, "You were never nothing, you just needed someone to remind you." When people in nearby towns told their story, they always began with pity and ended with wonder. They said a lonely lumberjack bought a woman for $2, but in truth, he bought hope, trust, and love that neither of them had believed in anymore. And on the porch of that old cabin, beneath the whispering pines, they grew old together, proof that even the smallest act of kindness can rewrite the cruelest fate.